Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are coming at you with another Tavour review, and we're going two completely opposite ends of the spectrum, but there is a commonality here, and that's both beers are fruited, but completely different in their approach. So the first beer we're starting with today is from Seven Stills. This is their Gose Mosa, which is a triple kettle soured ale that's been brewed with champagne grapes, blood orange, and tangerine. So essentially a triple kettle soured Gose that's mimosa flavored. 11.5% ABV on this one, and they are based out of San Francisco, California. Number two, we've got Woodland Empire's Feed My Brain. This is a strawberry shortcake lager that's been brewed with strawberries and lactose. So it's going to be a sweetened lager and help to accentuate the strawberries and kind of play on that kind of dessert feel. 4.6% ABV on this one, and Woodland Empire is based out of Boise, Idaho. So we've got a sour that's got fruit added, and then a sweetened lager that's got fruit added, and they're almost miles apart in terms of ABV as well. So two completely ends of the spectrum, both in their approach and their ABV, but I can't wait to jump in. So we're going to do exactly that, starting with the Seven Stills Gose Mosa, the triple kettle sour ale that's been brewed with champagne grapes, blood orange, and tangerine, and this one clocks in at 11.5% ABV. Okay, jumping right in with the first beer of today's review, we have got Seven Stills Gose Mosa, triple kettle soured ale brewed with champagne grapes, blood orange, and tangerine. 11.5% ABV on this one. They are based out of San Francisco, California. So firstly, the label art, it's not over the top, but it does look really neat. I'm a big fan of this design. It looks rather funky. And, you know, just a little champagne flute of what I presume is the beer, but easily could be a mimosa. So it looks fantastic. And we're going to get this one cracked gently here. Nice tall can, so this will not fit all in my Sam's glass, but we'll get it poured anyway. Oh, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful hue to this beer. It doesn't actually look that dissimilar to an actual mimosa. Not that I fancy drinking them, but I have many friends that enjoy them. All right, got that one poured. Visually, it looks great. And indeed, even the way the carbonation is coming up, it does put one in mind of a mimosa. It's got that very fine, fast, effervescent champagne-like bubbles coming up out of it. Really looks great. Nice yellow with a slight orange hint to it. Slight orange tint. No head. It's a sour. I don't expect it. I don't actually appreciate it on a sour, so let's give it a sniff. Okay, so while I can tell you I can pick up some tart and some sour on the nose, really it's the fruit that kind of balances it out. So it doesn't smell overt. I imagine it's going to have a nice bit of sour and tartness to it, but the fruit really cuts through. The champagne grapes really do kind of stand out because they keep the tangerine and the blood orange from overpowering the flavor, and it's got a very nice smell. It does smell fruity, and it does smell sour, and it does smell tart. But yeah, it's the champagne grapes that are really kind of giving me the, oh man, I can't wait to jump in this. It's got a very nice smell, very unique. Let's jump right in. Give it a sip. Wow. Okay. Wow. That's a big beer. It's very big, and it's just packed with flavor. Okay, you first get it in your mouth, start to swish it around. You absolutely get the sour and the tart. And it's probably pretty intense, but the flavors are so big and bold that it all just kind of works together. The key here is balance. Behind that, you get the champagne grapes in full force. It really does add an element to this beer that just tastes remarkably like champagne, like a nice brut champagne. It's not a demi-sec, it's not sweet. It's a nice dry brut champagne quality that comes through, though the beer itself is not dry. I'm gonna have to jump back in for body and mouthfeel because the flavor was so complex I was trying to pick it out, so I'm gonna have to do that. The body on an 11.5% ABV is quite a bit less robust than maybe the ABV would let on, but I think for what they're doing with the beer, it's wholly appropriate. It's a medium body, which for a sour is kind of big, but it's 11.5%, so it feels right. Mouthfeel, exactly what I expected. Very active in terms of carbonation, and that's what you get in the bubbles. It's not super thick, but it's very, very carbonated, and it's very, very active in the mouth. In terms of the flavor development, everything that I picked out up front really does come through, but what I want to jump back in is see if I can pinpoint exactly where the ride takes you all the way to the end. It is exceptionally well balanced and it's very enjoyable. It's very unique in terms of a beer. I'm a fan of this. I'm gonna take one more sip and see if I can pick this out. Sour, tart, slight funk, huge champagne flavor. Just a balance of the tangerine and the blood orange. They kind of mix. They don't overpower the sour and they don't overpower the champagne grapes. So it's really letting the two keys of the beer itself kind of play their part without getting overpowered by the big citrus. Both tangerines and blood orange can very quickly overpower the other flavors that go in to make any beer's bill. I think they were very smart in the way that they built this because they all get their voice. It's just so well balanced. It's very crisp, got a nice wet finish, which, you know, you don't think about that other than demi-sex and a few other in terms of champagne. Most people think of brutes. That's the most common style by a mile. But for a beer, I really appreciate it. So you get all these layers of flavor and all that complexity, but still got a nice, wet, rounded finish to it. And frankly, at an 11.5% ABV, I appreciate that. This is a very nice beer. It's very crisp, it's very refreshing, it's very unique, and it is very tasty. I'm going to take my time sipping on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get to our second beer. That is Woodland Empire's Feed My Brain, the strawberry shortcake lager. It's been brewed with strawberries and lactose to sweeten it up. 4.6% ABV. Okay, now moving on to the second beer of today's review, we have got the Woodland Empire's Feed My Brain. This is a strawberry shortcake flavored lager. So it's been brewed with strawberry and lactose to sweeten it up and kind of accentuate that baked good quality they're going for. This one's quite a bit lower in terms of ABV at only 4.6% ABV, and Woodland Empire is based out of Boise, Idaho. So first thing first, in terms of label art, it's got kind of a cool little label art here. I don't know how best to describe it. Very kind of almost psychedelic cartoon-like. I can't even begin to guess what the scene is supposed to be, but I like it. It's appealing to look at. Nonetheless, let's get this one cracked. Gonna be gentle here. All right. Poured right in the glass. Oh, very nice looking beer. Very light in terms of hue. Which probably is a good choice if you're going to make a strawberry shortcake flavored beer. I mean, you could probably do it at a dark base, but I think a lighter base might work better because kind of the cake base to strawberry shortcake is lighter. It's not deep and rich and roasty and intense like that. Yeah, visually it's very nice looking beer. It's very active in terms of carbonation. And I can tell you these are some pretty large carbonation bubbles coming up. It's not super fine. It's almost entirely large and just a handful of medium. But it did form, as you can see quite clearly there, a nice thick frothy head. Yeah, that's quite thick. Let's give it a sniff. Not the most pronounced aroma in the world, but what I do smell smells good. You can pick up the strawberries just a little bit, but predominantly what I'm getting is the malt bill. And it smells like a very clean, good baseline for a beer that you're going to try to flavor up and using something delicate like a strawberry. It does smell nice. No denying that, but it very much smells more like beer and malts than it does strawberry. So we'll see how accentuated it is. Nonetheless, looks great. Head is holding true. let's jump in, give it a sip. I'm really quite surprised by that. That's really good. So while you may not pick up the strawberry virtually at all on the aroma, just the slightest hint, it smells very beery. I'll tell you what they did with this, really, really well done. This actually truly does properly put me in mind of strawberry shortcake or a strawberry sugar cookie. If you've never had one, they're delicious. It really does. I think that they did a great job here getting about as close to nailing that flavor and that kind of feel as you possibly could in beer form. It's really nice. It's got just enough lactose to sweeten up and let the strawberry come out, but the malt bill, it really does put me in mind of, say, a shortbread or almost like a sponge cake base. It does very much remind me of strawberry shortcake as a dessert. It's really well done. It's really well done. I'm going to jump in one more time here for body and mouthfeel, see if I can pinpoint where these flavors develop. Body, I'd say, is more or less medium light to medium. It's not super heavy. 4.6%, I didn't expect it to be. It falls pretty much right where I expected. Mouthfeel, it's not viscous, but it feels right. It certainly feels right for the type of beer, and it feels right for the ABV. That said, if you start to agitate it around the palate to let the flavors coat, it gets very, very, very creamy. Very creamy indeed. And then that gives it this kind of thickness. And I'll tell you, the flavors really do coat the palate. It does. It puts me in mind of strawberry shortcake or strawberry sugar cookies. It's quite delicious. This is quite a delicious beer. In terms of how the flavors develop, I'm going to jump in for one more sip because I'm trying to think about too many things at once, and frankly, it's very good. I'd like to jump back in here. First, get it in your mouth, roll it around. You absolutely pick up the strawberry and you pick up that sweetness. And it's not pungently sweet. It's the right amount to pair in the beer and the beer style. Honestly, this is just so well balanced. I'm really impressed. And it's very bright strawberries and very much what tastes like shortcake. Honestly, it does. I absolutely think that they nailed this in beer form. This tastes like strawberry shortcake or really a nice strawberry confection, a strawberry sugar cookie. It's sweetened strawberry, but tastes like baked goods. It really is delicious. It really is delicious. I'm a big, big fan of this beer. I'm going to take my time sipping on this. I'm going to come up with my scores, and when we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to get them ranked. Starting with the Seven Stills Gose Mosa. This is the triple kettle sour ale brewed with champagne grapes, blood orange, and tangerine. This one's out of San Francisco, California, clocks in at 11.5% ABV, so quite big for a sour, certainly. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this was just incredible. Had a really good sense of what to expect before I even jumped in it, and it was pungent. You could smell it from quite a distance. The sour and the tart came through quite clearly, slight little twinge of funk, and the champagne grapes really came through strongly, and I knew I was in for something special. Blood orange and tangerine came through as well. Just a big aroma for a big beer. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Taste, I really, really enjoyed this. Overall, the flavor profile, I absolutely loved it. The only things really I could say is, as much as I enjoyed the champagne grape quality that came through, I think maybe a little additional blood orange and tangerine would have balanced it out a bit more. And even though it was triple kettle soured, a little more sour. I think that's really the only tweak I could make, but it was very close. I only docked 1 point. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Body-wise, for the style, they don't normally have the largest body, let's be honest, but 11.5% ABV is very high for any beer. And even the sours you don't think is the biggest, most robust body, at that ABV, there's a lot of fermentables that went into there, and that does add to the base big breadth to the body. And this one was above average, but it was nowhere near what I expected for 11.5%. I did give it a 7 there. For the mouthfeel. Mouthfeel was exactly what I expected. Even though it was a big beer and the body wasn't quite as huge, it did have an appropriate mouthfeel, both in terms of the ABV range and certainly in terms of the style. I didn't take any points away. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish, this was a very nice beer. It was very enjoyable, and the finish certainly was longer than average. There's no question about that. Though honestly, given how pungent and bold the flavors were, in tandem with the style and the high ABV, I did expect it to have quite a bit longer, lingering flavors on the palate to each sip. It was still well above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. Head and retention on this was fantastic. It did form a little one. It got out of the way. It is a sour, and that's really what I expect, and that's what I want. It gets a 10 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was a stunningly beautiful beer. It really did look quite a lot like a mimosa, which I think really they're going for a Gose Mosa sour Gose interpretation of a standard mimosa. It was lovely. It gets a 10 out of 10. Balance. I mentioned this in a few other categories here. Really, for me, overall, I thought it was a very well-balanced beer, but I would have liked a little more sour and tart to come through, and maybe just a little more blood orange and tangerine to balance out the champagne grapes, or just slightly fewer champagne grapes to let the blood orange and tangerine come through. But it wasn't off by much. I only took off 1 point. I gave it a 9. Feeling in the Intangible. I really, really enjoyed this beer. I truly did. It was certainly very special and very unique, and I gotta say, I've had a lot of different beers over the years, but this is one of the more unique ones. The Champagne Grape Edition alone was a really interesting move in a beer, and I think it worked quite well here. Just a few minor tweaks, but overall, I did enjoy the beer drinking experience. I give it an 8 out of 10. Finally, as an example of this style. I did nitpick a few categories here, but overall, this was a very, very strong beer in terms of just a sour and indeed kind of the unique twist and flavor profile that they brought to the table. I thought it was very, very well done, and this is certainly the first 7 stills I've had. I am very much hoping I can get my hands on some more, because if this is indicative for what they're doing in San Francisco, I think getting more of their beers is certainly in order, and I plan to do exactly that. This was a very nice sour, very unique, just a few little nitpicks I had. I only took 1 point away. It gets a 9 out of 10. That brings the total score on 7 Stills Gose Mosa to a 90 out of 100. So this is a well above average beer, well worth seeking in my opinion. Very unique, very interesting flavors, and a really fine example of an interesting sour. Moving on to beer number 2. We've got Woodland Empire's Feed My Brain. This is the strawberry shortcake lager that's been brewed with strawberries and lactose. Almost a third of the ABV of the prior. This one clocks in at 4.6, and they are based out of Boise, Idaho. Starting with the aroma. The aroma was quite tame. You could say it was not very pungent at all. You had to get really, really deep down in the glass and really breathe in deeply. What I could detect smelled nice, but it just wasn't pungent at all. Even with agitating it, it really didn't open up. I could smell some sweetness, some strawberry, but that's about as far as it went. I couldn't get that deep into the beer. It gets a 3 out of 10. For the taste, what I did pick up in the aroma really came through strongly in the taste, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought this was a slam dunk beer interpretation of a strawberry shortcake. It really did put me in mind of the dessert, really any kind of baked, rich goods, strawberry sugar cookies if you've never had them, strawberry shortcake, all very similar flavors, pungent strawberry and that kind of sweet and slightly shortbread. It was delicious. I give it a 10 out of 10. For the body was exactly what I expected for the ABV, and if anything, maybe slightly bigger, which as a dessert flavored beer, I appreciated it. I think the lactose helped. I give it a 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, same thing here. This was a perfect mouthfeel for a lager, and that lactose really added this element of thickness to kind of make that dessert side of the beer stand out, and certainly really thickened when you agitated it around the palate. Got very thick. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish, I didn't expect the finish to be as long as it was considering the ABV range, but frankly, the ingredients came through so well and worked so well together that they just kind of lingered out on the back end. And it was very, very enjoyable, certainly above average for a lager and certainly for, the ABV range. It gets an 8 out of 10. Head Head retention, this one did great. Formed a nice head and it really held in there and stuck around almost the whole time I enjoyed the beer. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Appearance, this was a beautiful light lager that really, it didn't kind of give you any indication of strawberry. You had to jump in and really get it. It was lovely. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Balance, wonderfully balanced beer in my opinion. If anything, maybe just a little bit more lactose to accentuate the strawberry, or maybe a little extra strawberry added in. I think the malt bill that they had to really kind of underline the shortcake side of the equation was great. Just a little extra sweet and or a little extra strawberry to accentuate that a little more, I think would have brought out the balance exactly where I wanted it. I docked 1 point, I gave it a 9. Feeling in the Intangible, thoroughly enjoyed the beer. It was fantastic. I think it's just about as close as one could get to imitating strawberry shortcake in beer form. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, there's a lot of lagers out there. There's a lot of flavored lagers out there, and certainly there's a lot of beers and lagers brewed with lactose to kind of accentuate this and that. But this one I thought was very special. I thought they did a very good job. I did nitpick some categories and it lost some points in a few critical areas, but overall the beer was just such a strong example of what they were trying to do. I only docked 1 point. It gets a 9 out of 10. That brings the total score on Woodland Empire's Feed My Brain to an 89 out of 100. So between the two beers, completely different styles, completely different ends of the spectrum on ABV range. Really the only commonality is they were fruited. They're only 1 point apart and completely different. So depending on what you're looking for, these are two I would highly recommend to anybody if you can get your hands on them. And that's the beauty of Tavour. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop with our videos, go live to YouTube. Just click the notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.